a working. Hey, from the milk house hum to the auction call, these are the folks standing strong and tall. Yeah, this is the bovine coming on the air, sharing the stories of the folks who care. Profiles of passion, voices of the trade, dairy strong legends being made. Yeah, this is the bovine coming on the air, sharing the stories of the folks who care. Profiles of passion, voices of the trade, dairy strong.
Welcome back to the Bovine Podcast. We just got back from Victoriaville, and I don't think we've ever had this much to unpack from one show.
Quebec Spring 2026. I mean, 3 championship banners for one farm, a grand champion with a pedigree 4 generations deep, and a judge who literally called it an unreal experience. Let's get into it.
Yeah, let's start with that hook, because I want you to picture the center of the ring at Victoriaville.
Oh, man, the atmosphere.
Right. The crowd has gone completely silent. You have 6 cows standing on the shavings, and they represent the absolute pinnacle of bovine biological engineering.
They really do.
We aren't just talking about pretty animals here. We are looking at living, breathing, metabolic marvels. The tension is palpable because at this level, the margins for error are they're microscopic.
Oh, absolutely. You're splitting hairs at that point.
Exactly. You are looking at mammary systems that seem to, defy gravity. Frames that are perfectly balanced.
Yeah.
And then Judge Pat Lundy steps forward, takes the microphone, and points to the 5-year-olds.
JM Valley Sidekick Jacuzzi.
JM Valley Sidekick Jacuzzi. He calls the lineup an unreal experience.
It's the kind of moment that breeders chase their entire lives, you know. But what makes this specific deep dive so fascinating isn't just the thrill of the grand champion slap.
Right.
The source material from this show, it provides us with an absolute masterclass in genetic strategy. We didn't just see one farm win the genetic lottery.
No, we really didn't.
We saw 3 entirely different breeding programs completely run the table in different ways, and they did it by solving the complex biological puzzle of dairy cattle in completely different ways.
Exactly. I want to look at the mechanics of how they pulled this off, because so much of what we read in show reports feels like magic.
Oh, for sure. It's always like she has a great pedigree, so she won.
Right. Great pedigree, automatic win. But it's not magic. It's biology, it's physics, and it's compounding genetic interest over years. Let's start right at the top with Jacuzzi's grand champion win.
Let's do it.
When she walked into the ring, campaigned by Butlerview Farm and Pierre Boulay, the sheer physical dominance was just undeniable.
Oh, she owned the ring.
She really did. And the report highlights her powerful front end and massive chest width. But for someone outside the inner circle of cattle, judging why does chest width win a cow a ribbon? What is the actual physiological advantage there?
Well, that is the perfect place to start because the show ring is ultimately trying to identify the most efficient, durable commercial animal.
Right. It's not just a beauty pageant.
Exactly. Chest width isn't just an aesthetic preference for a wide-looking cow. It is directly correlated to internal capacity for the animal's respiratory and cardiovascular systems.
Okay, so the engine room.
Precisely, the engine room. A dairy cow producing high volumes of milk is basically running a metabolic marathon every single day.
Every single day.
Yeah. To synthesize milk, she needs an immense amount of blood flowing through her udder. I mean, it takes roughly 400 to 500 liters of blood passing through the mammary gland to produce just 1 liter of milk.
Wait, 400 to 500 liters of blood for 1 liter of milk. That is a staggering ratio.
It's insane when you really think about the biology. So to pump that kind of volume, she needs an incredibly powerful heart, and she needs massive lungs to oxygenate that blood.
Wow. Okay, that makes total sense.
Right. So a cow with a narrow chest simply does not have the physical skeletal real estate to house the size of heart and lungs required to sustain peak production over multiple years.
Because if she doesn't have the space, she just burns out.
Exactly. She burns out. When Lundy praised Jacuzzi's chest width, he was essentially praising the size of her biological engine.
So it's like comparing the engine block of a heavy-duty diesel truck to a compact car. She simply has more internal capacity to do the heavy lifting.
That's the perfect analogy, yeah.
But the report also heavily emphasized her foreudder blend. It noted that her foreudder melts right into the body wall.
That's a huge point.
I've always found this fascinating because we talk about attachments a lot, but What exactly are we looking at mechanically when we talk about a tight four-udder blend?
Well, mechanically, we're looking at the strength of the lateral suspensory ligaments and how smoothly the mammary tissue integrates with the abdominal wall.
Okay.
Think of the udder as a heavy, fluid-filled vessel that can weigh upwards of 100 pounds or more when it's full.
100 pounds.
Yeah.
Just hanging there.
Exactly. If the fore-udder attachment is loose, or if it, bulges out abruptly, it creates a structural weak point. Over time, gravity and the sheer weight of the milk will pull on that attachment, causing the udder to drop.
And when the udder drops, you'll run into commercial farm issues, right?
Oh, a ton of them.
Like increased risk of mastitis, the teats get too close to the ground,
Yeah.
milking machines can't attach properly.
Spot on. A tight four-udder blend means the load is distributed evenly across the abdominal wall. It's aerodynamically smooth, if you want to use that term.
Aerodynamic. I like that.
Yeah, the tissue is pinned securely to the body, which ensures longevity. Jacuzzi had the massive internal engine we talked about with her chest, but she didn't sacrifice the silky structural refinement required to hold her mammary system in place.
Which is why she took Best Udder in the 5-year-old class.
Right, because she represented the perfect intersection of power and structural integrity.
Okay, let me push back a little on how she got there. Because we look at her pedigree Sidekick, crossed on a Crushtime, crossed on a Cindadoor, going back to Loyalyn Goldwyn June.
The famous 4-generation masterpiece.
Right, the masterpiece. But I look at a lot of pedigrees on paper that are packed with high-type sires, and then the actual calf hits the ground and looks nothing like the paper promises.
How happens all the time.
Genetic recombination is essentially a lottery. So how much of Jacuzzi's perfection is just rolling a double six on the genetic dice versus actual predictable breeding?
It's a great question. And it gets to the heart of what separates an average breeder from a master breeder. Yes, genetic recombination involves chance.
Right.
When a sperm meets an egg, you are getting a random assortment of genes from both parents. However, when you selectively breed for the same specific traits over 4 generations, you are doing something called increasing homozygosity for those desired traits.
Homozygosity, meaning the genes for those specific traits are identical, so there's less chance of a random, unwanted variation popping up.
Precisely. If you just take a random good cow and breed her to the number 1 bull of the breed, you might get a great calf or you might get an absolute dud.
Because her genetic background is just scattered.
Exactly. But let's look at what the breeders did with the June family. They didn't just chase the hottest name in the catalog. They practiced incredibly disciplined corrective mating.
Let's break that down for the listener. Corrective mating versus just picking a top bull.
So corrective mating is looking at the cow standing in front of you, identifying her one specific flaw, and finding a bull whose absolute greatest strength is fixing that exact flaw.
While ensuring he doesn't ruin the things she already does well.
Right, that's the hard part. So let's trace it backwards. The foundation is Loyalyn Goldwyn June.
A legend.
Goldwyn was a legendary sire known for transmitting incredible show-ring style and dairy refinement. June passed down that essential will to win and durability.
But no cow is perfect forever. As generations pass, if you don't inject specific traits, things can drift.
Exactly, you get regression to the mean.
So they bred her daughter to Cindadoor. For those who aren't deeply immersed in sire catalogs, what is a Cindadoor and what was the biological goal there?
Well, Cindadoor was a sire known for transmitting what we call dairy strength.
Okay.
And when we say dairiness, we don't mean a skinny, frail cow. Dairiness or angularity refers to a cow that shows metabolic efficiency. She doesn't carry excess flesh.
Right. She's not beefy.
Exactly. Her bone structure is flat and clean, particularly in the thigh and the sweep of the rear rib. Cindadoor ensured that this family, which was building power, didn't turn into overly conditioned animals.
He locked in the will to milk.
Yes. Ensuring their metabolism always prioritized milk production over laying down body fat.
That's a crucial distinction, metabolic prioritization. So Cindadoor brings the dairy angularity. Then the next generation, they use Crushtime as the maternal grandsire.
Right. If Cindadoor gave the angularity, Crushtime is the architect of the physical frame.
Okay.
He brought extreme length from nose to tail and height. He built the massive, long skeletal scaffolding. Think of him as the steel girders of a skyscraper.
The steel girders. Okay, so we have the foundation of style and durability from June, the metabolic efficiency from Cindadoor, and the massive skeletal scaffolding from Crushtime.
Yep.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the sire, Sidekick.
Exactly, and Sidekick is renowned for bringing immense chest width, substance, and exceptional mammary systems.
So he was the missing puzzle piece.
Completely. Because the Crushtime generation provided the perfect long dairy frame, Sidekick didn't have to fix a multitude of structural sins.
He just had to do what he does best.
Right. Hang an incredible udder on that frame and widen out the chest. By the time Sidekick was introduced, the genetics of that family were so prepotent, meaning the traits were so deeply locked in over the generations, that the outcome was highly predictable.
It wasn't rolling the dice. It was executing a blueprint.
Executing a blueprint to perfection.
That analogy of the skyscraper is fantastic. Sidekick essentially came in to do the interior design and the plumbing the udder because the steel frame was already perfectly erected.
Yeah, the heavy lifting was done.
And it's fascinating because this didn't happen in a vacuum. The context of the show really highlighted this specific stage of a cow's life. The 5-year-olds completely ruled the day, taking both grand and reserve grand champion over the mature, older cows.
Which tells us a lot about the biological sweet spot in the modern Holstein breed right now.
Explain that. What is the sweet spot?
A 5-year-old cow is typically on her 3rd or 4th lactation. She has reached full skeletal maturity, so she has the mass to compete with the older cows.
But she's not worn out yet.
Exactly. Her mammary system hasn't been subjected to 5 or 6 years of the mechanical stress of milking. She still has the youthful, tight attachments. The 5-year-old class right now is the ultimate collision of mature power and youthful udder quality.
Which transitions us perfectly to the program that absolutely swept the floor of Victoriaville. Fermi Jacobs.
Oh man, what a run.
Because while Jacuzzi's win was the headline, the underlying story of this show was the sheer suffocating dominance of the Fermi Jacobs operation. They walked away with junior champion, intermediate champion, and reserve grand champion.
And here's the single most important detail about those 3 banners. All 3 were bred and owned by Fermi Jacobs.
Let's pause on that because the economics of the show ring are often misunderstood by people outside the industry.
Very much so.
A lot of top-tier show strings operate on what you could call the checkbook model.
Right.
A farm with significant capital will go to elite sales across North America and purchase the absolute best heifers and young cows, bring them home, manage them perfectly, and win.
And there's immense skill in that. Talent identification, elite management, it's not easy.
For sure, it's incredibly hard.
Yeah.
But bred and owned is a completely different universe of difficulty.
It is the difference between managing a hedge fund of hand-picked stocks and actually building the companies from the ground up.
Wow, that's a great way to put it.
To breed and own a junior champion, an intermediate champion, and a reserve grand champion means your genetic pipeline is flawless at every single age metric.
It means your mating decisions made 3, 4, and 6 years ago were all completely correct simultaneously.
Exactly. You didn't just guess right once, you guessed right over and over and over again.
It reminds me of a dynasty in sports. You can buy free agents to win a single championship, but if you want to win for a decade, you have to have a farm system that constantly develops draft picks.
Fermi Jacobs is running the ultimate genetic farm system.
Let's look at their reserve grand champion, Jacobs Unix Carful, who has scored EX92. She's a Kale daughter. Honestly, if Jacuzzi hadn't walked into the ring, Carful would be the cow we were spending the entire deep dive talking about.
Oh, without a doubt. She is an absolute marvel of physical length.
The notes on her specify her extreme end-to-end length. And again, let's tie this back to the biology of the dairy cow. Why do judges obsess over length?
Well, I assume you'd guess it's about capacity again.
Yeah, I'd assume so.
Exactly, but in a different dimension. Length from the tip of the nose to the pins, the rear of the pelvis dictates the length of the digestive tract.
Oh, interesting.
A longer cow has more room in her barrel for the rumen, the massive fermentation vat where she digests forage. More length equals more capacity for feed intake.
And more feed intake equals more energy for milk synthesis.
You've got it. Furthermore, length through the frame usually correlates with a longer, more sweeping udder floor, allowing for larger, more capacious quarters, without the udder having to hang dangerously low to the ground.
And Lundy explicitly noted her udder, stating that her rear udder just really spells milk. The height, the width, the sheer capacity. She pushed Jacuzzi to the absolute brink for the grand champion title.
It was a very, very close call.
But what I find even more impressive is that Fermi Jacobs didn't just win with mature, fully developed cows like Carful. You walk down the barn aisles to their younger strings, and the dominance continues.
It just doesn't stop.
Their junior champion, Jacobs Ambrose Bonbon, won the fall 2-year-old class.
Now, Bonbon is a phenomenal case study because she represents the leading edge of modern genomic breeding.
Right.
She won Best Udder in her class, And the defining characteristic, the judge noted, was the massive spring and expansion in her midsection.
For a fall 2-year-old, a cow that has only recently had her first calf to exhibit that kind of barrel capacity, that depth of fore and rear rib, while maintaining a tightly attached mammary system, I mean, it is exactly what commercial dairymen dream of.
It's the holy grail.
I want to talk about her sire, because this feels like a major validation moment. She is sired by Progenesis Ambrose. Now, Ambrose has been what we call a genomic darling for a while. Let's explain what that means for the listener who isn't steeped in the AI artificial insemination industry.
So a genomic darling is a young bull whose DNA has been sequenced shortly after birth. Scientists look at his genetic markers and predict, based on algorithms, that his future daughters will be spectacular.
So it's all on paper at first.
Completely on paper. Because his numbers are so high, breeders start using his semen globally before he even has a single milking daughter on the ground. It is an investment based purely on genetic prediction.
But the rubber eventually has to meet the road.
Exactly. 3 years later, those daughters calve in, and the industry watches with bated breath to see if the actual animals match the spreadsheet predictions.
And sometimes they fail spectacularly.
Oh, we've seen it a million times. But Bon Bon and the other Ambrose daughters we are starting to see are finally validating what those early genomic numbers promise.
He is transmitting that massive midsection, that openness of rib, combined with real, durable, udder quality.
Yep, for any breeder who is on the fence about using Ambrose, looking at a young cow like Bon Bon is the ultimate proof of concept.
That is a critical takeaway for anyone making mating decisions this week. But Fern May Jacobs wasn't done. Right between the 2-year-olds and the mature cows, they struck again.
The intermediate champion.
Millen, Lambda, Amelia. She's a junior 3-year-old. Now, we should be precise here. They did purchase Amelia, but she fits their systemic model perfectly. She topped a massive lineup of 6 contention cows.
It was a huge class.
Her dairiness is extreme, but Lundy specifically highlighted her rear udder turn. I mentioned earlier I wanted to define this jargon. What exactly is a rear udder turn, and why did it win her the banner?
The rear udder turn refers to the specific anatomical seam where the rear mammary tissue meets the body wall way up high under the vulva.
Okay.
You want this attachment to be as high and as wide as physically possible.
Why? Just for volume?
Volume, yes, but also physics. The higher and wider the rear udder attachment, the more support the entire mammary system has from the rear suspensory ligaments.
Makes sense.
If the curve where the udder tissue blends into the leg and body wall is narrow or low, it means the udder is hanging more like a pendulum, unsupported.
And pendulum swings, which causes stress.
Exactly. A high, wide turn means the udder is anchored firmly to the skeletal structure. Amelia's rear udder turn was flawless. It was pinned high and wide, giving her immense capacity without sacrificing any structural integrity.
This brings us to perhaps the most fascinating puzzle of the entire show, the intermediate championship drive.
Oh, this is good.
This is where Judge Pat Lundy had to earn his paycheck, because he was presented with a scenario that breeders debate endlessly. In the central ring for intermediate champion, he had Amelia and another junior 3-year-old.
Right.
But standing next to them was the winner of the senior 3-year-old class, Milk and Honey, I'm a Sexy Baby. And this senior 3 was a completely different biological equation.
She certainly was. She took honorable mention intermediate, and she won best udder in her class. But the critical context here is that she was just 2 weeks fresh.
2 weeks fresh, meaning she had given birth just 14 days prior to walking into the ring. Let's explain the physiological reality of a cow that is 2 weeks fresh, because it drastically changes how they look.
Oh, it changes everything. When a cow is 2 weeks fresh, she is in the absolute peak of mammary expansion. The udder is engorged with milk, the blood flow is at an absolute maximum, and the udder tissue itself retains a certain amount of fluid called udder edema.
And that creates what we call bloom.
Exactly, bloom. The venation on the udder is popping, the quarters look incredibly full, and the udder visually screams extreme milk production. It is an incredibly impressive, almost overwhelming sight.
So she has this massive blooming udder. She wins best udder in her class. She's older, more mature. And yet, Lundy doesn't give her the intermediate banner.
Nope.
He gives it to Amelia and the other junior 3-year-old. I can imagine half the people on the rail groaning and the other half nodding in agreement. Why didn't Lundy take the bait of that massive, fresh udder?
Because Lundy understood the difference between a temporary state and permanent structural integrity.
Right.
This is where we step directly into the judge's mind and analyze his rubric. Freshness and bloom are temporary.
It fades.
Exactly. In 3 months, as her lactation curve drops, that edema will leave, the bloom will fade, and what you are left with is the permanent structural foundation of the udder. Lundy specifically noted that while the Senior 3 had incredible bloom, she couldn't match the frame balance and the udder floor levelness of the Junior 3s.
Udder floor levelness. This sounds like an architectural term.
It absolutely is. The udder is divided into 4 distinct quarters. The udder floor is the bottom plane where the teats are attached.
Okay.
A level udder floor indicates that the median suspensory ligament, the primary elastic band running down the center of the udder that holds the whole thing up, is exceptionally strong and balanced.
And if the floor isn't level, what's the real-world consequence?
Well, if the floor tilts forward, it means the rear quarters are heavier or the fore attachment is failing. If it tilts backward, the reverse is true.
And in a commercial setting?
In a commercial dairy setting, an uneven udder floor is a nightmare. It means the milking machine cluster will sit unevenly. The higher quarters will milk out faster, but the machine will stay attached to them while it waits for the lower quarters,
Causing overmilking.
overmilking, teat end damage, and eventually mastitis. A perfectly level udder floor means symmetrical milk production and a healthy, long-lasting udder. Lundy prioritized that permanent structural correctness over the temporary wow factor of the fresh bloom.
That is incredibly practical insight. He didn't just want the cow that was milking the most on that specific day. He wanted the cow whose anatomy proved she would milk trouble-free for the next 5 years.
Spot on.
He also noted that Amelia won because her fore-udder blended more smoothly into the body wall, and she showed more width and strength through her front end.
Exactly. Lundy's decisions across all 9 milking classes revealed a very strict, consistent, and highly educational rubric. If we analyze his placings, a distinct hierarchy of traits emerges.
Let's outline that rubric, because if there's a breeder listening right now trying to decide which cows to put on the trailer for the fall shows, this is the cheat sheet.
It really is. His number one priority, unequivocally, was the mammary system. But he was deeply specific. He was looking intensely at the rear udder. Height, width, the turn we discussed earlier, and the symmetry. That was his primary sorting tool to divide the top half of the class from the bottom half.
And once he had sorted the elite udders to the top, what was his second priority?
Frame balance. And the primary indicator he used for frame balance was that fore-udder blend.
How it all ties together.
Right. He wanted to see how the mammary system harmonized with the skeletal structure. He penalized cows where the udder looked tacked on rather than integrated into the abdominal wall.
Okay, so mammary first, frame balance second. What was the final tiebreaker when 2 cows were dead, even on the first 2 criteria?
Feet and legs, mobility. Or if mobility was identical, he used dairiness, that angularity, and lack of excess flesh as the final deciding factor.
So the formula is rear udder, fore udder integration, then mobility and sharpness.
That is the modern blueprint for a show-winning dairy cow.
I love how logical that is. It removes the mystery.
Yeah.
But I want to challenge one aspect of that rubric.
Go for it.
Why are feet and legs third? In a commercial freestall barn, a cow has to walk on concrete to the feed bunk, to the milking parlor, back to her stall. If she goes lame, she's called, regardless of how good her udder is. Shouldn't feet and legs be the primary priority?
It's a fantastic point, and one that commercial producers argue constantly. Mobility is critical. However, historically and biologically, udder breakdown is still the primary reason an animal leaves a herd involuntarily.
Really?
Yeah. A cow with phenomenal feet but a pendulous udder will step on her own teats, get mastitis, and leave the herd. A cow with average feet but a perfectly attached udder can often be managed through hoof trimming.
That makes sense.
Furthermore, in the elite show ring, almost every cow in the top 10 of a class already possesses above average feet and legs. Because the baseline of mobility is already so high at a show like Victoriaville, Lundy uses the minute differences in udder attachment to find his winner.
That perfectly bridges the gap between the commercial reality and the show ring. The show ring is essentially the Formula One of the dairy industry.
Oh, I like that comparison.
The R&D, the extreme refinement of the mammary system we see in the ring, eventually trickles down into the commercial AI studs and improves the udder quality of the entire global herd.
It does. It shapes the whole industry.
And speaking of the bulls driving that genetic improvement, let's pivot to the sires that absolutely dominated this show. If there were 2 names echoing through the barn aisles in Victoriaville, they were Lambda and Sidekick.
If you are a breeder still sitting at your kitchen table, looking at a sire catalog, debating whether to use Delta Lambda on your best cows, this show formally settled the debate.
It truly is a closed case. Lambda's legacy was cemented in the 4-year-old class. This was staggering. Lambda daughters went first, second, and third.
A clean sweep?
A clean sweep of the podium in one of those competitive age brackets. And what's fascinating is that they all share this incredibly distinct genetic stamp. You can stand at the edge of the ring, look at the lineup, and almost pick out the Lambda daughters without a catalog.
You really can. They are prepotent for incredibly square frames. Their top lines, the spine from the shoulders back to the tailhead, are as hard and straight as a board.
Yeah.
But the defining characteristic, the reason they swept the top 3 spots, is the quality of their mammary systems as they age.
Let's focus on that.
Right.
Because Lambda was heavily used as a sire for heifers. Everyone knew he made fancy, sharp yearlings.
Right.
But the lingering question in the industry was always, what happens when these pretty heifers have 3 calves and have to produce 30,000 pounds of milk a year?
Yeah.
Will they hold up?
The 4-year-old class proved definitively that they do more than hold up. They mature magnificently.
So let's look at how Lundy broke down the top of that class, because the placings offer a phenomenal study in comparative anatomy.
Yes, let's look at the breakdown.
First place was Fortel Lambda Loa, taking best udder. Second was Pierstein Lambda Atlantic. Third was Rapian Lambda Adu.
Right.
So if they are all sired by Lambda and they all have that square frame and great udder, how on earth do you separate them? Why did Lundy place Loa over Atlantic?
Well, the break between first and second came down to extreme sharpness, dairiness, and the microscopic detail in both the fore and rear udder. Loa is fresh with her 3rd calf.
3rd calf.
Think about the mechanical stress of 3 pregnancies and 3 lactations. Yet she is showing incredible angularity. She is sharp over the shoulder, long and clean through her neck, and her mammary system literally just keeps getting better.
Wow.
The venation is more pronounced. The attachments haven't yielded a millimeter. Atlantic mirrored her squareness and level rump, but Loa had the ultimate edge in dairy refinement and the sheer silkiness of her udder tissue.
Okay, so Loa wins on sheer refinement. What about the break between second and third? Atlantic placed over Adu. What was the deciding factor there?
That break came down strictly to feet and legs.
Back to mobility.
Yes. This addresses your earlier point about mobility. Both cows had the requisite frame and udder, but Atlantic simply moved better. Let's get biomechanical for a second.
Let's do it.
Lundy noted she tracked straighter and had more flex to her hock. The hock is the primary joint in the rear leg. You don't want a leg that is perfectly straight. We call that post-legged because a straight leg has no shock absorption.
Right, it's just rigid.
Every step sends a jolt up the spine. Conversely, you don't want a leg with too much curve sickle-hocked because that puts immense strain on the tendons.
It's like walking in a permanent squat.
Exactly. Atlantic had the perfect intermediate angle. The joint flicks smoothly, allowing her to cover the ground with a long, comfortable stride.
It's amazing how much engineering goes into a cow walking across a ring. And then the break from third to fourth.
Third to fourth was decided by front-end mass and udder bloom. The 3rd place cow, Adu, just possessed more substance up front, a wider chest floor, deeper heart girth, and more capacity in her mammary system on the day of the show.
And finally, 4th to 5th.
Purely feet and legs comfort. The 4th place cow was just more comfortable standing squarely underneath herself.
It's so granular.
It is.
Yeah.
When you listen to a judge break down a class with that level of granular reasoning, first it's dairiness, then it's hock mobility, then it's chest mass, then it's standing comfort, you realize the immense complexity of this puzzle. But the common denominator solving that puzzle at the top of the class was Delta Lambda.
I have to give a massive shout out to Fortel Lambda Loa, that 1st place winner, because this wasn't a fluke.
No, not at all.
She was the intermediate champion at this exact show last year as a senior 3-year-old. To come back a year later, have another calf, transition perfectly, and win a loaded 4-year-old class.
Yeah.
That is the definition of biological durability.
That is the ultimate test.
It's one thing to peak for one show. It's another to sustain elite performance across multiple years.
Absolutely. And if Lambda owned the middle-aged cows, we have to transition to the mature cows because that ring belonged to the sire of our grand champion.
Sidekick.
Yes, Sidekick. We saw his influence on Jacuzzi, but seeing it replicated across the mature class proves his absolute prepotency. 3 of the top 5 cows in the mature cow class were Sidekick daughters, B in 2nd, Ray-Ban in 3rd, and Ivy in 5th.
Incredible.
Sidekick brings a very specific stamp to these older cows. Incredible depth of rib, undeniable mammary quality, and immense longevity. They don't burn out.
But the top of that mature cow class was absolutely fascinating from a judging perspective because it gave us the ultimate philosophical debate in dairy cattle breeding: mass versus quality.
It was a beautiful study in contrast. You have the first place cow, Pure Dempsey Lexi, and the second place cow, Jacob's Sidekick B. Two phenomenally correct animals that achieve greatness through completely different biological avenues.
Let's break this down because this is the debate bleeders have leaning on the rail of every show ring in the world.
Oh, yeah.
First place went to Lexi. Lexi won on sheer overwhelming power and presence. She has this incredible width that starts right at her chest floor, carries all the way back through her ribs into a wide rump, and that width drops directly down into her massive mammary system.
She's a tank.
Lundy noted she had more volume, more openness, and more drape to her rib than any other cow in the class. She is a powerhouse.
She is the living embodiment of mass. She overwhelms you with her capacity. But then you look at the cow standing right behind her in second place, Sidekick B.
Right.
B actually took the Best Udder Award for the class over Lexi. B is a completely different kind of cow. Where Lexi overpowers you with strength, B seduces you with absolute quality and refinement.
Seduces you with quality. Paint that anatomical picture for us. How does a cow beat Lexi on udder quality?
It comes down to the texture and attachment of the tissue. B has a melting foreudder. It doesn't even look attached. It just seamlessly blends into her body wall like it was painted on.
Wow.
Her rear udder height is stunning, pinned extremely high up under her vulva, maximizing her capacity without the udder hanging low. And the veination Lundy specifically stopped to highlight the roadmap of veins on her udder.
We mentioned veination earlier regarding blood flow. Visually, what does extreme veination tell a judge?
Extreme veination, thick, prominent, branching blood vessels visible just beneath the skin of the udder tells a judge two things. First, the cow is moving a massive amount of blood to synthesize milk, which proves her metabolic engine is running at elite efficiency.
Right.
Second, it proves the skin of the udder is incredibly thin and refined. Thick, fleshy udders hide their veins. A thin, papery hide on the udder is highly desirable because fleshy udders are prone to swelling and take longer to milk out.
So they're just more practical to milk.
Exactly. These veinations screamed dairy quality.
Ultimately, Lundy decided that Lexi's sheer power and frame volume took the blue ribbon, but B's mammary quality earned best udder. B's advantage in foot angle and leg mobility is what kept her ahead of the third place cow.
The classic power versus dairy debate.
And both cows represented the absolute pinnacle of their respective styles.
It's amazing how two cows that look so fundamentally different in their build can both be so anatomically correct. And, that brings us to a thread that has been weaving quietly through this entire deep dive.
Let's hear it.
We've talked about the titans like Ferme Jacobs, but we have to talk about the quiet, undeniable force of Pierre Boulay.
Yes, Pierre Boulay. We've mentioned him a few times. He co-owns the Grand Champion, Jacuzzi. He co-owns the mature cow winner, Lexi.
Right.
But his operational model is so completely different from Ferme Jacobs. He doesn't have the flashy social media presence. You aren't seeing highly produced drone shot videos from his farm every week.
No, not at all.
But his actual footprint across this Victoriaville show was enormous. He literally bookended the entire day.
He had a hand in the Grand Champion Jacuzzi and the honorable mention Grand Champion Lexi. But what's brilliant is his financial and operational strategy. He is utilizing a multiple partnership model.
Syndicating the risk.
Exactly. He co-owns Jacuzzi with Butler View Farm. He co-owns Lexi with Jim Butler.
Let's dive into the economics of that, because campaigning a show string at this level is astonishingly expensive. You were talking about elite feed, trucking, professional fitters who spend hours clipping and preparing the hair coats, entry fees, hotel rooms. It adds up to tens of thousands of dollars per show.
Oh, it is a massive capital output. Pierre Boulay understands the immense financial risk and labor burden of elite showing. By forming strategic partnerships, he isn't trying to shoulder the burden entirely on his own.
He is syndicating the risk, much like racehorse ownership.
That's the perfect parallel. Racehorse ownership. Furthermore, he is doing it across multiple sire lines and breeding programs. He placed cattle in almost every single mature division.
Let's list them off.
First in mature cows with Lexi. Second in 4-year-olds with Pierstein Landa Atlantic. Third in 5-year-olds with Clayhaven Crushable Lezana. He is essentially acting as a premier talent scout, sourcing, buying into, and developing elite cattle from everywhere.
And we have to highlight his incredible stockmanship, specifically with Pierstein Dempsey Lexi. This cow's run at Victoriaville is legendary. She was grand champion at this show in 2024, she was honorable mention grand in 2025, and now in 2026, she is honorable mention grand again.
That is just unheard of.
To have a cow peak perfectly for 3 consecutive spring shows, that defies the odds.
Yep.
You are managing her lactations, ensuring she calves at the right time. You are managing her nutrition so she has the perfect amount of body condition, not too fat, not too thin.
You're walking a tightrope.
You are managing her hoof health and her udder health to keep her at that razor edge of show condition for 3 years. That is not luck. That is pure world-class stockmanship.
It is the absolute pinnacle of cow care. The attention to detail required to keep a massive, mature cow moving comfortably and milking heavily year after year is staggering.
Truly.
But while we are rightly praising the titans of the industry like Boulay and Ferme Jacobs, I think there is a vital, inspiring takeaway here for the everyday dairy farmer listening to this while they scrape alleys or push up feed.
I totally agree. Because it can feel discouraging to look at these massive operations and think, I can't compete with that capital.
Yeah.
But you look at the bred and owned scorecard from Victoriaville, and it tells a fantastic David versus Goliath story.
It really does.
It proves that you do not need 500 head and unlimited resources to compete at the highest level of dairy genetics.
You really don't. The bred and owned tally proves that ultimate excellence can emerge from smaller, intensely focused programs. Let's look at Ferme Fortale.
Let's do it.
We talked about their cow, Fortale Lambda Loa, winning the 4-year-old class and taking best udder. They bred her. They own her. They are a mid-size operation out of St. Christophe d'Arthabasca, running a manageable commercial herd, and they bred a cow that took on the absolute giants of the industry and won.
And look at Ferme von Sicard. They bred and owned Sissy Unix Adrien. She placed second in that incredibly deep, heavily contested senior 3-year-old class, holding her own right in the middle of a Ferme Jacob sandwich.
Right in the middle of it.
She's a Unix daughter, and her placement proves that a smaller farm's disciplined breeding decisions can stand shoulder to shoulder with the best in the world.
We also have to mention Petit Clerc from St. Bizzle. They had a cow, Chief Anton, placing 4th in the junior 3-year-olds. The Petit Clerc program has been quietly placing animals in the top 5 across multiple classes for years.
Consistency.
Exactly. They are consistent, they are hyper-focused on functional type, and they are doing it entirely with cattle they bred themselves.
So how does a 40-cow tie stall operation beat a massive, heavily funded show string? It comes down to observation, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
When you milk the same 40 cows twice a day, every day, you know every single minute flaw in their anatomy. You know exactly which bull to use to correct that flaw. You aren't making breeding decisions on an Excel spreadsheet. You're making them with your hands on the animal.
That is precisely it. The playing field is ultimately leveled by biological reality. If you study the pedigrees, if you deeply understand functional anatomy, and if you are fiercely disciplined in your corrective matings, you can breed a cow that walks into the center ring at Victoriaville and stops the show.
Good genetics, combined with meticulous daily management, will always be the great equalizer.
Always.
All right, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We've dissected the biology of a 4-generation prepotent pedigree. We've looked at the venture capital model of Ferme Jacobs' farm system. We've broken down the exact mechanical physics of fore-udder attachments and rear-udder suspensory ligaments. And we've analyzed the prepotency of sires like Lambda and Sidekick.
That's a lot of ground.
It is. Someone is listening to this right now, between milkings, looking out over their own herd of cattle. What is the one core insight from this deep dive into the Victoriaville show that they should carry with them?
The ultimate lesson of Quebec Spring 2026 is the mathematics of the long game.
The long game.
Yeah. Whether we are talking about Jacuzzi's pedigree, deliberately constructed over 4 generations to finally take the grand champion banner, or Lambda daughters proving their structural durability over multiple years in lactations.
Or a small breeder like Fortale, patiently developing a cow year over year.
Exactly. True excellence in breeding is never a random accident. It is the result of quiet, consistent, biologically sound decisions made years before a halter ever goes on the animal.
So what's the question they should ask themselves?
So the question I want to leave the listener with is this. Look at your heifer pens today. Which corrective mating are you making right now based on the anatomical flaws you see today that will dominate the mature classes in 2030?
Wow, that is the perfect question to end on. Because the genetic decisions being made in the barn today are literally writing the show reports of tomorrow.
That's another one from the Bullvine podcast, Quebec Spring 2026, a show that reminded everyone what structural depth and genetic prepotency really look like.
Full results, photos, and the complete show report are at www.thebullvine.com. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next.